Okay, today's daf is Masechta Menachos Daf Ayin Hey and 75. And we will start from the Mishnah. The Mishnah on Daf Ayin Daled Amid Beis. So we're discussing the Inyane of Menachos over here. And just to review what's written in the Chumash. Here, the Parshas Vayikra, the pasuk this tells us what to do with their various different carbon minchas. And here, V'nefesh Kishakrav, the first part talks about a minchas soilus. The next one talks about a minchas machavas, which we've seen what that is. It's a flatter type of keli. It's not baked directly on the floor of the oven. It's baked in a keli in the oven. And there the Torah says soilus b'shemen, belula b'shemen, matzos tiyad. And then the Torah tells you postus oisipitim, crumble it, fold it. And then v'yitzakta oleha shemen. So there's belila and yitzika. We're going to learn what that is. And marcheshes, which is a shallower pan, which is a deeper pan. There the Torah tells you soilus b'shemen te aseh. Right. So the few various different halachas of mincha that we've seen. So let's just do the pictures. When you're making a mincha soilus, you put oil first, then you put the flour, then you put a mixture of oil. Then you put a mixture of oil. You mix it with oil, most of the oil, and then you do yitzika. And then you do which the leftover oil, as you can see. And then you put slabina, and then hagasha, etc., kmitza, which we discussed earlier. Now, regarding the mitzvah of minchas chala, remember the minchas chala is also called minchas ma'afei tanur, mincha of the baked in the pan, mincha and baked in the oven, and there are two types of mincha. One was called challah, which is it's baked on the oven floor without a pan, but it's also very more looser. Here, you just do belila, but notice yitzika is missing over here. There's no yitzika. It has the same thing. So basically, they pour all the oil in while they're mixing the dough. Whereas, and then they bake it. Now, I'm going to talk to you about how they was folded, but basically it was folded into fours, as you can see, and they break it into four different pieces. You see how he broke it into four different pieces over here? And then he put it all into the keli, and then did the kamitza, as you can see over here. This was the mafei taner, one mafei taner A. But then there's a mitzvah mafei taner B, and here there's a little mistake, I believe. There's another one called rakikin. Rakikin means flat. Now here, they did the kneading with water, but they didn't mix additional oil. I think this is a mistake. They didn't mix the oil. What they do with the oil, they added the oil in the letter tess, basically like a little tess it's supposed to be. And the rest of the oil was eaten by the kahana. So it wasn't mixed with oil. It was just smeared with oil after it was baked. But it had the same din as the minchas machvas is the flatter pan, as you can see over here. They had a flatter pan where the oil ran off. Here, it needed three parts to it. First, you put the shemen and the keli. Then you did the belila. I should make this a highlight. Then they did the belila. Then they baked it. Pesisa, they broke it up into different challah pieces, let's say, and then yitzika, then they added oil. So you have three times oil over here. And the same thing of marcheshes. The difference between machvas and marcheshes, they're both baked in an oven, except machvas, they use this type of flatter pan, and marcheshes was more like a deeper pan. They made 10 challahs. Okay, so now let's do the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah. Kol haminchas, all the menachos, shetuuna nasas bekeli, that's used in a keli, which means that's baked. Let's say the minchas machvas, minchas marcheshes, which was baked in a keli in the oven. Tuuna shloisha matana shemen. It needs 3 times you're giving oil. First one probably is matan shemen bekli koydem le'asyasa. It's not in order, but you first put the oil into the keli before it was done, and then it needed a belila. You mix it with oil while you're kneading it. And then after after it was after you finished with it, I guess after it was baked and broken into pieces, then you did yitzika, pouring the remainder of the oil. So need 3 times oil. Now, the now the mafi tanner. Now the Mishnah moves on to another topic. The baked. This is, let's say, minchas machlas, and minchas marcheshes, and minchas soilis. Fine, you need 3 times oil, but the minchas mafi tanner only needed 2 times oil. 2 times oil. Didn't need this yitzika. But chalos, when you're making the minchas machvei tanner, the one that was just baked in the oven with no keli, all you do is boil them. You mix it with oil after you baked it. Divrei Rebbe. So you kneaded it with water, and then after it was baked, somehow you mixed it with oil. The chacham no silas. When you're making a minchas mafei tanner, as you can see, minchas mafei tanner. Let's say mafei tanner was before, so then you mix it with oil prior to the baking. You mix it with oil prior to the baking, as it says over here. That's the din according to Chachamim. Now, chalas tunis belila. The chalas needed belila urakikin, the flat wafers of the mafei tanner. It did not need belila, so you needed it without water. You needed it without oil, but you needed it with water. But after you baked it, meshicha, you put a meshicha, you just smear it with oil. Ketzan moishchan, how do you do the meshicha? Kimin ki, it's like the letter tes. It's a Greek letter ki. And what do you do with the remainder of the oil, of the rekikin? Because you did a little smear, and that's it. The remainder of the oil was eaten by the kahana. Says the Gemara, the Mishnah said that most menachos needed three sets of oil. Yes, because the one that was baked directly on the oven floor, there it didn't need yitzika, or some didn't need belila, but but it needed 2 sets of oil. But the minchas machvas, minchas marcheshes, minchas soilis needed 3 times giving of the oil. Tanu Rabbanim, the rabbis taught. Now, in minchas marcheshes karbanecha soilis bashemen teyaseh. Torah tells you, which we saw the psukim, that if you make a mincha in a marcheshes, right? If you make a mincha in a marcheshes, which is the deep pan, soilis bashem and teyaseh, put the soilis, the flour, on top of oil. Malami, this teaches you shtuna matan shemen bekli, that you have to put the oil first in a vessel. Karbanecha, l'gzeir shava. Then there's a gzeir shava, which we're going to compare the minchas al machvas karbanecha, the minchas marcheshes karbanecha, so that we have here a gzeir shava, right? So there we have a gzeir shava machvas to marcheshes, and therefore we apply whatever is said by one to the other. Ma'kan matan shemem kli aflahalam matan shemem kli. Just like over here by marcheshes, you put the oil first in the keli. So also by the machvas, you put oil in the keli. Malahalan, just like by the machvas, we say yitziko belila as two other givings of the oil. You knead it with oil, and then after you bake it, you pour oil on it. Afkan, so also the marcheshes, afkan barcheshes, also needed yitziko belila. So the marcheshes needed. So basically, the machvas marcheshes needed 3 things: matan shemem kli, belila, and yitzika. So matan shemen keli mean you put oil in the keli prior to putting the flour in, then you mix it with oil, then after you bake it, you pour oil on top of it. And same thing with the minchas soilis. The ones that didn't need yitzika, as we saw in the Mishnah, was the chalas mafitana, the and rekike mafitana, the mincha mafitana, which was baked on the oven floor. But when did you do the belila of? So Tanrabanan, when Tanrabanan, let's say by the minchas mafitana, it says soilis belula. You mix it, you knead it with oil. Belula means mixed with oil. Malamich nivlela soilis, that when you knead it, it's with oil. Okay, so it's kneaded with oil. Rabbi says no. Chalalis balalam. You put the oil after you knead it with water. But when do you add oil to mix it? After you turn it into chalas, shnema chalas belulas. So basically, according to Rebbe, you would actually bake it with water, then you crumble it up, and then you add oil in it. So the Chachamim said it can't be that way. This week Sedra, we'll have the breads of Torah. It says also chalis, the afshal and all of the lachmi Torah, the 40 loaves, you brought one loig, and therefore 1/8 of the loig was 1/8. Well, 1/8 of revius was so small amount of oil, it would be impossible to put it into a dry food. The afshal abaylim, it's impossible for it to be mixed kishein chalas when it's already baked. Elasoilus, only when it's soilus, only when it's flour, then you put a little oil, you can get it, you can mix it in. But if it was already chalas, since in the lachmi toida, it was obviously that you can't add oil after it was baked. So also by every other mincha, you don't add the oil after it was baked to do some mixing. Only prior, when it's soilus, when it's flour, then belula, you make it, you mix it with oil. So now we explained according to Chachamim, and it gives you the straight up rules of the situation. Ketzad oisa. Okay, let's say, how do you make a mincha machvas? Noishin shem and keli. First, you put oil in the keli. Koidim liasyasu. V'noishin, and then you put the flour. V'noishin shem and then you put oil. Ubailula, and then you mix it. V'loshin, then you knead it. V'oif, and then you bake it. Upaisasa, and then you fold it over into pieces. Then v'noishin alei shem, and you put the third time oil, which is the yitzika. V'kaimets, then you make kamitza. So 1, noishin alei shem, 2, and 3. Rebbe says chalos boilelim, shnema chalos blue shemen. So according to Rebbe, what was the order? Kate said, "Oh, so how do you do it?" Rebbe agrees that you first put oil in the vessel prior to you making it. The nice, and then you put the flour. The lashon, you knead it. Now, flour alone cannot be kneaded, but we add water. And then you bake it. And then you put it into pieces. Then you put oil. Then you mix it with the baked breads. And then then you put oil on it to the Mekayim, the mitzvah of Yitzika, the Kaimets, and you do Kamitza. Where would be it impossible to do it the way Rebbe said to do it? What case was the Rabbanan referring to when they said to Rebbe, but the Lachme Toida was be impossible? It was only an eighth Reviya Shaman, a quarter of a log, which is eighth of Revius, and therefore Hech Mischalekas the Kamachalas. How would you be able to put that drop of oil into like the 40 loaves? So you can't do it that way, into the chalas. So therefore, done. They disagreed with Rebbe. Then we learned in the Mishnah, chalas tunas belila rekika mashicha. The chalas needed belila, and the rekika needed mashicha. Tanarabban and the rabbis taught chalas belulos, veloy rekikim belulin. The chalas needed oil and not the rekikim. Okay, so the rekikim did not need oil. That's why this book is a little bit wrong, because it puts by the rekikin, it gives you the list, and it adds belila, but that's not true. They didn't mix it with oil. By the rekikin, the flat ones, they just baked it on the floor of the oven and then just did a mashicha afterwards. Yes, they put oil in the vessel prior, but they didn't add, after adding the cellulose, they did not do this. So this is a mistake. In fact, if you say the Amafei Taner of the Rekikin, here it says you first put oil, silas, right? And of course you put the keli, you put the oil first, and then you put the silas, then you put water, then you knead it, and then you bake it, and then you put with your finger on the Rekikin. Whereas the Mafei Taner, he gives it, you put again the silas in a keli that has oil in it, right? Then you put all the oil, and then you mix it, then you put it a little water, and then you knead it, and then you divide it into eser chalas. So anyhow, there could be mistakes. So Tarabana, chales belules, rekikim belules. Shiochav alidinu. Ma chalash ein tunas mashicha. A normal achala doesn't need mashicha. Tunas belila, you need it mixing with oil. Rekikin shetuna mashicha. If the rekikin needs a smear of oil afterwards bake, tunas belila. I would think that it also needs belila. When you're kneading the dough, you should knead it with oil. Because rekikin, you're doing something extra that you're not doing by chalas. So that's why the Brisa teaches you rekikin shatunim mishicha and din shatunim belila. Talmud learn chales belulos v'loy rekikin belulin. Only chales got the mixing of the oil. Rekikin was not needed with oil. And then the Brisa says rekikin meshuchen v'loy chales meshuchas. Rekikin got the smear of oil and not the chales, because I would have thought sheyochal v'lidinu. Umar rekikin she'enet tuna belila, rekikin that doesn't need belila, tuna mashiach needs a smear of oil. So I would think chalish tuna belila. I would think that chalish needs belila. So certainly it should also need a mashiach after you bake it. Talmud leima rekikim meshuchim v'lei chalas meshuchas. The rekikim needed the smear and not the chalish. So in the picture, exactly, this rekikim needed a smear, but it was not needed with oil. This chalas, the chalas belula b'shamin, was belula b'shamin, but after it was baked, you didn't smear it with oil. So it's each one particularly. My Talmuda, how do you see that? Wherever the Chumash writes it a number of times in different parashiyos, the Torah always stresses that the chalas were meshuches, which means mixed with oil, kneaded with oil, and the rekikim were smeared with oil. And it doesn't say it anywhere else that the chalis were meshuches, rekikim were belulim. Never does it say that. It always says chalis belulis, rekikim meshuchen. So that's why it's specific. What applies by one does not apply by the other. Then what is the shmir? How does it look? Kimin ki. My kimin ki. Amarav kana kimin ki yavani. Like a ki, yavani. Ki is a letter in the Greek alphabet. And they say it looks like a test, although in the picture over here, he makes it look like a J. But it would look like a test, I guess, if you bring it up. So therefore, that's how you did the smearing of the oil. Taner Rabbanan, rabbis taught, let's say you made a donation of minchas mafi taner. And according to Reb Shimon, you could make it a hybrid, half chalas, half rekikim. So, according to the Tana Kama, maybe loik shemen v'chatzei, you bring the loik shemen and you split it between the chalas and rekikim. Chetzi lechalas v'chetzi rekikim. So a half a loik is for the rekikim. The chalas by little rekikim moishchan. Umoishach has a rekikim apnei kulai. You do the mashicha not like the letter key, but you put the mashicha all on the like on the front of it, totally on the front of the matzah. Ushar shemen, the rest of the shemen, machzir lechalas, you return it to the chalas. So that's very interesting. First of all, the Tanakama says when you do mashicha on the rekikin, it's al pnei kulay, and then they say the rest of the shemen you put it back into the chalas. With the chalas already had a half a loik, you add the rekikin part of the leftover shemen from the rekikin, you give it to you offer it up to the chalas, into the belila of the chalas. Shimon ben Yehuda Aimah Mishum Rab Shimon Aimah Moishchen Kamin Ki. You make the mashicha like a key. Ushar Shemen Nechel Kahanim, and the rest of the oil is eaten by the kahanim. So first he argues in two ways. First of all, the mashicha of the rekikim was like I showed you in the picture, like the letter ki, and the rest of the oil was not given back to the chalis, but is eaten by the kahanim. Tanya Idach, and another brayso we learn rekikim aboim b'fnei atzmon. If you make a donation of rekikim by itself, of course, so you bring 10 rekikim, maybe look shemen u'moishchen v'choyz u'moishchen achitil kula shemen maluk. According to the Tanakama, you keep doing the mashicha on the entire matzah of the rekikim matzah, the flat matzah, and keep doing mashicha, smearing, till you use up all the oil. Reb Shimon ben Yehuda, Reb Shimon, moishchen kimiki, you do it once, like the letter ki, ushar shemen nechel kahanim, the rest of the oil is eaten by the kahanim. Then the Mishnah continues and says, Kol ha-menachas and-nasa b'kli tunim psicha. Every mincha needs a psicha, needs to be folded over. Lemute mai, amar apapa lemute shtei alechem alechem aponim. Shtei alechem alechem aponim, didn't need to be folded. Shtei lechem and lechem upon him, as we've seen many times, this picture was not folded. Shtei lechem and the lechem upon him were not folded. It was just held out there. Every mincha needed to be folded. I would think that the shtei lechem and the lechem upon him also need to be folded. Only the minchas need to be folded, not the shtei lechem upon him. Yitzak the Shem mincha, the rabbis, that includes kol menachos litzika. Every mincha needed a yitzika. Yochol shani marba af minchas mafe, mincha that's baked on the floor that also needs yitzika. Talmud loyme, the pasuk says oleho shemen. Oitzi as a chalas, v'lo oitzi is rekinkim. Talmud loyme he mincha he. Yitzak the Shem mincha he. So the mincha he is by here. I guess it's with posses of Yitzakto Leo Shema Mincha he, that the machvas and the marcheshes and the soilis all need yitzika, but the minchas mafe taner, which comes in two parts, chalois and rekikin, there the Torah gave special miyutin mincha he that you don't do yitzika. That's what the Gemara is going to say. My Talmuda, maybe Yitzika is excluding Minchas Kahanim and not Minchas Mafetana. We go to Amid Beis. But the Torah gives you two limitations. So it must exclude the Minchas Mafetana, the Chalis and the Rekikim of the oven, directly oven baked Minchas do not need a Yitzika. But the rest of the minchas do need yitzika. Now we're talking about the folding. Minchas Yisrael koifel echel shnayim v'shnayim la'arba u'mavdil. You break it into four pieces, as we saw in the picture over here. You break the mincha into four pieces and you divide it. Minchas kohanim, but the minchas kohen koifel echel shnayim v'shnayim la'arba. You do need to fold it. Ve'enim mavdil. You don't split it. You don't fold. You just fold it, but it remains intact. Minchas Kohen, Mashiach lo yemekapla. From the pashtus of the minchas of a Kohen Gadol, they did not even fold it at all. But we're going to learn that they folded into two, but not four. Shimon says minchas kahanim, minchas Kohen Mashiach, ein b'hem psicha, you never fold it. Now, Shimon disagrees. You don't fold it. But if they ein b'hem kmitza, because you're not doing kmitza, you're totally learning the minchas Kohen Gadol and the minchas Kohen is totally thrown on the mizbeach. She'ein b'hem kmitza, ein b'hem psicha. And anything that doesn't need kamitza doesn't need folding. The kulam paischim kazesim, and they all fold it to the size of a olive. You don't fold it into crumbs. Tanu rabbanim pasos yachal l'shnayim tamad loim epitim. I pitim yachal alsena perurim tamad loim oisa lepsisim v'loy psisa lepsichim. So the Torah tells you fold it, but don't fold it few times, but the Torah indicates that you shouldn't make it into crumbs. How do you do that? Minchas Yisrael koifel echel shnayim v'shnayim labar umavdil. By Minchas Yisrael, you fold it into four twice, and then the twice into four, and then you separated them. Minchas Kahanim Kohen Mashiach koyim a kapla. And even the Minchas Kohen and the Kohen Gadol, there was folded but not separated. Says the Gemara, but we learned about the Kohen Mashiach, the Kohen Gadol's mincha was never folded. Amarabe, it was folded, but not like the Minchas Kohen. You fold it into two, so you have three sets. The Minchas Kohen Gadol was folded twice. The Minchas Kohen was folded four times, and the Minchas Yisrael was folded into fours and sliced so that it was four different pieces. Shimon Minchas Mashiach ein b'hem psisa. Amar Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef says, according to Rabbi Shimon, Minchas Kohen didn't have any folding at all. I don't know why the Gemara just brings this, because the Gemara now just goes off on a tangent. Amar Rav Yosef, hi chavitza, this dish made out of breadcrumbs, just breadcrumb. This bei prurim kazayas, if the breadcrumbs are the size of a kazayas, if all the breadcrumbs are smaller than a kazayas, you make a barim min mizaynis. Amar Rav Yosef, so it defaults to a barim min mizaynis, because it's only if it's the size of a kazayas of an olive, then it's big enough to make a hamaitzi. If not, you make a mizaynis. Amar Rav Yosef, how do I know that? Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, if a kohen for the first time is coming to Makrav Menachos, maybe the first time that year, not lachlam, if he eats the mincha, utna, we learned v'kulam sisim kazayas, all the crumbs were kazayas. So the only reason why the kohen, when he's eating the mincha, is making hamaitz lechem and arts, because all the size of these pieces were a kazayas, right? Says the Gemara. According to Rabbi Shmuel, he holds, not like our Mishnah, that when you break it into pieces, you break it into tiny crumbs. You turn it actually into flour. According to Rabbi Shmuel, so when they eat the mincha, you don't make a hamaitzi. Are you going to say that according to Rabbi Shmuel, you don't make a hamaitzi? Well, Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, even according to Rabbi Shmuel, you have all these bread crumbs, the minchas crumbs. Likas mikulim kazayas v'achlo. If you collect it, a kazayas from all of this, right? And it's in the yont of a Pesach. So let's say you have a pan. We have a brisa that says a pan of breadcrumbs, and you eat a kazayas of it. Im chametzu anish kares. If it's chametz, you get kares. Im matzahu. If it's matzah kazayas, albeit it's made of breadcrumbs, you could yaitze your mitzvah of eating matzah because you ate a kazayas of matzah. So how does this brisa fit? That if you're not going to make a mezainas, if it's not a hamaitzi, how could I be yaitze the mitzvah of matzah on it on Pesach? You're dealing with breadcrumbs that are smaller than a kazayas. So it's only that you're combining it into a kazayas, but it's smaller. The pieces are smaller than a kazayas. Answer the Gemara, and that price is talking about bish irsa. You actually kneaded it together into a big piece, into a kazayas piece. Says the Gemara, that's not true. Bryce says if you ate all the crumbs in b'chdei pras, if the Bryce is talking about you re-kneaded it together with water and created one big piece, that you ate it in a certain period of time. Not you ate sha'achalon, you ate them in a certain period of time. So this brisa is clearly talking about tiny breadcrumbs, and the brisa says if it's chametz on the yont of a Pesach and you eat all these breadcrumbs, you get kares, and if it's matzah, you could be yotzi yedei chavasa b'matzah. How does that work? How does that stem with what Rav Yosef said, that if you have a tiny chavitza, which is a thing that's made of tiny breadcrumbs, and if it doesn't have pieces that are kazayas, you make them a zainas. And says the Gemara, that price is talking about babo melechem gadol, that really there's a big piece of bread next to the breadcrumbs. So the breadcrumbs, the whole bread was not turned into breadcrumbs, and therefore those pieces, although they're less than a kazayas, would be those crumbs would get a hamoitzi lechem min haaretz. But what Rav Yosef is talking about, if you take the entire bread and break it down into tiny pieces less than a kazayas, there where you don't have any bread, so even the breadcrumbs are not choshev, not choshev, you would make a boyer minus zaynis. So my halacha, what's the halacha? Rav Sheshes says not true. Afila peruim she'im ben kazayas. Even if you have breadcrumbs that don't have a kazayas, you would still have to make a boini hamaitzi lechem in arabs. Rava says qualified. That you can tell they're breadcrumbs. If you look at them, you can tell they came from a bread. But if they don't look like breadcrumbs, then you would make a boyer mina mezainis. So that is the halacha that comes out from this in Hilchas Bracha. So hence,